Being a parent means worrying about things that no one else even thinks about. Most of the time, those worries never amount to anything. But once in a while, they do. A few months ago, my 10-year-old son, Mason, went on a school field trip. I remember that morning so clearly because he was so excited. They were going to a nature reserve a couple of hours away. It was a big deal for him. His first overnight trip. I had signed all the forms, packed his bag, even thrown in a few extra snacks. The school had been very clear about the itinerary. The kids would spend the day hiking, have a campfire in the evening, then sleep in dorms at the visitor center before heading back the next morning. At 9 a.m., we dropped him off at the school parking lot. Parents stood around, watching their kids pile onto the buses. Teachers taking attendance. I spotted Mason's homeroom teacher, Ms. Campbell, near the front. She gave me a reassuring smile and a nod as Mason climbed onto the bus, waving from the window. Then they were gone. The day passed uneventfully. I wasn't worried. It was a school trip, well organized, supervised. I even joked with my wife about how quiet the house felt without him. Then, around 11 p.m., my phone rang. I recognized the number immediately. It was the school. A strange feeling crept into my chest as I answered. It was Ms. Campbell, her voice tight. She said she needed to ask me something. My stomach twisted. She hesitated, then continued asking me if Mason was with me, and if I had picked him up. I felt like my brain short-circuited. I was already standing, grabbing my car keys. I shouted no, that he was supposed to be with her. There was silence on the other end. Then, finally, she said she didn't know where Mason was and they couldn't find him. The words made my vision blur. I barely heard the next part. Something about a head count. How they were getting ready for bed when they realized Mason wasn't in his assigned dorm. The teachers had searched the building, the surrounding trails. Nothing. I was already in my car, speeding toward the nature reserve, 2 hours away. Along the way, I learned the details. Mason had been seen at dinner. He had been seen roasting marshmallows at the campfire. But at some point after that, he had disappeared. His backpack was still in the dorm. His jacket, too. But he was gone. I asked the question that had been burning in my head. What about the buses? They checked. The buses were locked for the night. The drivers were gone. None of them had left after arriving. There was no way he had left with them. But someone had seen him leaving. One of the chaperones, a parent volunteer, said they saw Mason walking toward the parking lot after the campfire. They assumed he was going to use the bathroom. There was a public restroom near the visitor center, but when they checked, he wasn't there. By the time I reached the nature reserve, the police were already there. A search team was forming, flashlights cutting through the dense trees. I joined them, calling Mason's name into the cold night. We searched for 4 hours, and then, at 3:30 a.m., one of the officers radioed in. They had found him. I ran. My legs nearly gave out when I saw him, standing at the edge of a gravel road, looking dazed, covered in dirt. His hands were scraped, his clothes torn. I grabbed him, pulling him into my arms, feeling his small body shake. He was freezing. His lips were blue. I asked him over and over what had happened, and finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he responded that he doesn't know. The police questioned him. The teachers questioned him. He couldn't explain anything. He remembered the campfire. He remembered walking toward the dorms. But after that, nothing. No memory of wandering into the woods. No memory of how he ended up miles away. The only thing he remembered was waking up on the side of the road, his body aching, his head pounding. That night, I stayed in a hotel with him, holding him while he slept. He would wake up every so often, looking around in confusion, as if expecting to be somewhere else. When we got home, I took him to the doctor. He had mild hypothermia, dehydration, and a few bruises, but was otherwise fine. The police kept investigating, but they found nothing. No signs of an intruder at the campsite. No reports of a suspicious vehicle. Just a missing gap in time. 4 hours where my son was nowhere, and no one saw a thing. The school sent out an official statement, calling it an unfortunate case of a lost camper. They tightened security measures for future trips. But I know my son. I know that something happened that night. And I will never stop wondering who or what took him. And why, for some reason, they brought him back. I used to work as a kindergarten teacher in a small town. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and parents trusted the school enough to let their kids stay a little later if they had work or errands to run. I often volunteered to supervise the late pickups, watching over a handful of kids whose parents were always running late. It never bothered me until that one afternoon. It was a Friday, just past 4 p.m. Most of the kids had already gone home, except for two, Lily and Evan. They were sitting at one of the tiny tables, coloring quietly, while I sat at my desk finishing some paperwork. Lily's mother was always a little late, but Evan's dad was usually on time. When it hit 4:30 and neither of them had been picked up, I checked my phone to see if there were any messages. Nothing. I called both parents. No answer. I decided to wait. Sometimes parents got caught up in traffic or meetings. I kept the kids entertained with more activities. But by 5 p.m., I started getting concerned. The school was nearly empty. The janitor had already left, and the sun was beginning to set outside. I called the parents again. Still no response. I even called the emergency contacts listed in the school records, but no one picked up. That was strange. Most parents at least had a backup plan. I tried not to panic. The town was safe, and this had happened before. Maybe they had the wrong pickup times in mind. I figured I'd wait another half hour before calling someone higher up. Then, at 5:15, the office phone rang. It was a woman's voice, calm but rushed. She apologized, saying she was Lily's aunt and that she'd be picking up both kids. I asked if she was on the emergency contact list. She hesitated before saying she'd been added recently. Something about it didn't sit right with me. I asked for her name, and she gave it. But when I checked the files, it wasn't there. That's when I told her I couldn't release the kids to her without proper authorization. There was a long pause, and then she simply said, "I understand," and hung up. A bad feeling settled in my stomach. I tried calling Lily and Evan's parents again, but still no response. I considered calling the police, but I didn't want to overreact. Instead, I locked the classroom door and decided to wait inside. About 10 minutes later, a car pulled into the parking lot. It wasn't one I recognized. A black car, tinted windows. It parked right near the entrance but didn't turn off the engine. I kept the kids inside the classroom, out of sight. I didn't want to scare them, so I told them we were playing a quiet game. Lily, always the curious one, tried to peek out the window, but I gently pulled her back. The car sat there for a few minutes. No one got out. Then my phone buzzed. A text message from a number I didn't recognize. "I'm here for the kids." I didn't respond. Instead, I called the police. As I was talking to the dispatcher, the car suddenly backed out of the parking lot and drove away. I told the police everything. They sent a patrol car over, but by the time they arrived, there was no sign of the car. 15 minutes later, Evan's dad finally called back. He sounded frantic. He had just gotten off a long shift at work and had left his phone in his locker. He was already on his way to the school. I asked him if he knew anything about Lily's aunt picking them up. His response chilled me. Lily doesn't have an aunt. That's when I knew. Whoever had called earlier wasn't supposed to be anywhere near those kids. When Evan's dad arrived, I explained everything. He was horrified. He stayed with me while I tried calling Lily's mom again. This time, she answered. She had also left her phone at work, completely unaware of what had happened. The police were able to track the call and the text, but they came from a burner phone. The security cameras in the parking lot only caught a glimpse of the car. No plate number. To this day, no one knows who was trying to take those kids. But I know one thing, if I hadn't been working that night, if someone less cautious had been in charge, Lily and Evan might not have gone home with their real parents. I never considered myself an overprotective parent. But after what happened 2 years ago, that changed. It was supposed to be a simple night out, just dinner, nothing too extravagant. A much-needed break from parenting. leaving our 5-year-old son Oliver in the capable hands of Rachel, a college student we had hired a few times before. The evening went by without a hitch. No calls, no texts, everything seemed fine. But when we returned home, the house was too quiet. Usually the TV would be on, or we'd hear the soft hum of voices upstairs. Instead, there was only silence. Rachel sat on the couch, staring at her phone, her face pale. Before any questions could be asked, Oliver ran from the hallway and clung to a leg, his small fingers tightening. There was a tremble in his voice as he muttered something about his closet. The words settled uncomfortably. A glance at Rachel showed she was shaken, her hands gripping the edge of the couch. She hesitated before finally speaking. She described putting Oliver to bed at the usual time. He had asked her to check the closet, something about a feeling, an unease. She had humored him, pulled the door open, peeked inside. Nothing there, just clothes, shoes, and a few scattered toys. She left the door slightly open, as he preferred, and tucked him in. An hour later, sounds from upstairs caught her attention. Soft, almost imperceptible, but enough to draw concern. Assuming Oliver was awake, she checked the hallway. Empty. But when she peered into his room, she saw him sitting up in bed, staring at the closet. She had approached cautiously, asking if he was okay. He only pointed. The closet door had shifted. It was open wider than before. A second search turned up nothing. No one behind the hanging clothes. No unexpected creaks when she tested the floorboards. But Oliver wouldn't settle. His expression held an unease that sent a chill through her. She had closed the closet door completely and decided to stay nearby, waiting in the hallway. But then, another sound. A faint creak. This time, it came from the closet itself. Fear had taken root in her then. Something wasn't right. She had locked his bedroom door, staying on edge until we arrived home. Her story left the air thick with unease. It would have been easy to dismiss as overactive imagination, Oliver's, or even hers. But the sheer terror in her voice made it impossible to ignore. A check of Oliver's room seemed necessary. He had already fallen asleep by the time the door opened. Everything appeared normal at first glance. Then, the closet caught attention. The door was open again. A thorough search followed. Clothes were pushed aside. The back wall was checked. The floor tapped for any hollow sounds. Nothing seemed amiss, but the uneasy feeling lingered. Just to be sure, the entire house was searched. Every door, every window, all locked. No signs of forced entry. And yet, something still felt wrong. Rachel left in a hurry that night, shaken. A few nights later, unease turned to dread. Waking suddenly in the middle of the night, a sound played through the baby monitor, soft shuffling, followed by the unmistakable creak of a closet door. The rush to Oliver's room was immediate. The door swung open to reveal him sound asleep, but the closet door, yet again, was ajar. This time, a closer inspection revealed something previously unnoticed. Deep, jagged scratches along the back wall. Not from a child's hand. Not from any furniture. Something deliberate. Morning brought further discoveries. A locksmith, called to examine the house, found something unsettling. The lock on Oliver's bedroom window had been tampered with. Screws, once firmly in place, had been loosened. Someone had been trying to remove them. It was impossible to say for certain if someone had been inside that night. But one thing became clear. Someone had been trying to get in. New locks were installed. Security cameras were placed around the property. Nothing strange ever happened again. But sometimes, late at night, the thought still lingers. How many times had someone stood in that closet, watching Oliver sleep?